Today I'll show you some tips and tricks on evaluating the build quality as well as the condition of an AK rifle. So the first thing in assessing the build quality is basically checking if the parts are milled or cast. Milling means you have a solid piece of material and you remove the parts you don't need. And as you can see, one giveaway is if you can still see machining marks. So this is a milled part. In comparison, this bolt carrier here is cast, which means you just melt it down, fill it into a form and let it harden. And casting is way cheaper in manufacturing costs as well as material costs, but it will be less durable than milled parts. And this doesn't mean that your cast AK won't run, but it means that probably it won't last as long as a milled an AK with milled parts. So no matter if your AK is milled, some parts still will be cast, like the front, the gas port here is mostly cast. It doesn't really matter here because it doesn't take that much abuse as like the parts here where the powder burns, right, and explosions happen. So you want to make sure that if you have the money or if you get a good deal, to buy an AK with milled parts. The second part is the rivets, and they will tell you quite a nice story on who made the AK and if they know what they're doing. So the rivets you want to look out for them being very round and looking symmetrical. So if they look like somebody smashed them with a hammer, you probably should skip that rifle. So those are nice and round. They're also flush to the receiver. And to further check that, turn off the lights, grab a flashlight, stick it into the receiver, and make sure there's no light being emitted through or around the rivet. So you know there's no tolerances where there shouldn't be any. So rivets, very important. They'll tell you quite a lot. So what else can we check? Obviously you want to check the barrel, right? And for this you remove the bolt carrier and the bolt, so it's safe to look through, and you just want to look through the barrel and either get a flashlight here or get some natural lighting. And what you're looking for with the barrel is does it have rifling? Because it's not a musket, right? We have rifling in the barrel. Is it very clearly pronounced? So the less visible the rifling is, means the more rounds already passed that barrel. And is there any parts missing in the rifling? Is there any anomalies, or did something look like it's missing some parts? Does it look like something's chipped out in the barrel? So that's things you should definitely look through. It's not going to be necessarily the gun won't work, but it will have big impacts on the accuracy if the rifling's bad or completely gone, right? So make sure to check the barrel too. Also, pay attention to the end of the barrel. So it should be nice and smooth here. There should be no damage to the threads on the barrel itself. Otherwise you will have problems mounting some muzzle devices and or suppressors if that's the case. But that will be part of another videos. The next thing you want to make sure is how does the action feel like. So if I pull back the action, and it will always hang a bit on the hammer here, but it should feel smooth. There shouldn't be any gritty sounds. It should be just pleasant to rack the slide. What else you can do is just pull back the bolt a little bit, let it go. So do that with different distances. And what you want to do here is check if it hangs anywhere. So without fully compressing the spring, meaning less power pushing on the bolt, check if it hooks anywhere on the rail. So if it does, that's probably not a good sign. So we check the rivets, right? We know what parts are good and what not. But one thing to determine the safety of the rifle is using a go or no-go gauge. And they come in different calibers. This is 7.62 by 39, which you use for this AKM. And what we're going to do is chamber one of the gauges. This is the go gauge. I'm going to remove the recoil spring to make it a bit easier for me. Chamber the go gauge. And the bolt should close without using any force. So I can use my pinky to close the bolt and it chambers very nicely. So that's fine. We're going to inject the go gauge. And this time we're going to add the no-go gauge. And here, the bolt shouldn't close. I'm using my pinky, right? And it doesn't close. But even if I use force, there's still a big gap. So that's what we're looking for. If your rifle closes on the no-go gauge, bring it to a gunsmith. If you're planning on buying a rifle that fails this test, I would strongly advise you against it. I mean, best case, it's going to be annoying. Worst case, it could lead to potentially life-threatening malfunctions of your rifle if the head spacing is bad. So head spacing is fine. We know if it's milled or cast. We check the barrel. The action's smooth. The trigger feels good for us. What else can we do? And what we want to check is has the rifle any signs, or does it actually have obvious signs of rust? So for this, we want to check certain parts. Especially look under the rear sight leaf. Is there any rust here? Is there any rust under the safety? Flip it up the whole way. Check if there's any rust here. Check the rifle outside, inside. Remove the upper gas tube. Check if there's any blistering or deformations on the barrel itself, just to make sure you checked every little inch of it, and so you don't get any nasty surprises. So there's no rust in this rifle. What's next? We want to check for excessive wear. So what does that mean? This scratch here on the receiver from the fire mode selector or safety is perfectly fine. It will be on every rifle as soon as you use it. If that is something that bothers you, you should probably not use an AK. So what does excessive use mean? Is it these scratches down here? No, that's just cosmetic. But especially in the bolt or the bolt carrier, you want to run your finger over every edge and check if there's any sharp edges. Is there any pieces missing? Like, is there an indentation where it shouldn't be? Just run your finger and check all the surfaces, and that's a good way how you can tell if it's still in a good condition. The finish will be gone here everywhere where metal touches metal, but as long as it's not excessive and you won't feel anything with your finger, you're good. One thing that will deform at one point, and this is the milled one, right? You see this tail here on the bolt carrier? This is where the hammer hits it, and it will deform after some time, so that's not bad. This one looks perfectly fine still. In comparison, the cast one, as you can see, they both have about the same amount of ammo run through them, but this one looks a bit dented here, so kind of a softer material, let's say. But as long as it doesn't mushroom yet and it doesn't get out of hand, this is still fine. You just have to check it every other time. So this is how you can check the bolt carrier and the bolt. Another thing is the gas piston, which is attached here. Shouldn't be too wiggly, so just give it a wiggle. If it's excessive, then something's probably wonky here. Make sure to check that too. So now we don't see any excessive wear on the bolt carrier and the bolt. Check the rails, especially check those parts in here. There's a feed ramp and a trunnion. Run your finger through it. Make sure there's no chunks missing, nothing jammed up on it or has bad tolerances, and that's why it's losing metal every time the bolt moves in, moves out again. So no excessive wear. The rifle looks fine, there's no rust. The barrel is great, the action's smooth, I like the trigger. What else can I do? Another thing is to check the front side post. So those wings here, they should be straight, they shouldn't be skew. Also, if you kind of look at the rifle from up here, there should be a clear line from the front sight leaf to the rear sight. Should be a straight line, it shouldn't be skew, otherwise somebody probably gave it a bad time, or it just was built in a wonky manner. So make sure that is all nice and straight, and it will shoot straight in the end, right? So the next part is to just check the furniture. So the front, the upper handguard might be wobbly depending on which AK you have. This isn't too bad, so this is perfectly fine. What you don't want to be wobbly is the lower handguard. Also, take the buttstock and kind of see if it twists. The same for the grip. This should be all nice and tight and not move one bit. So the last thing you can do in the shop is to get the magazine that comes with it. So if it's a factory magazine, you'll probably be fine, but insert the magazine, check if it's wiggly in this direction, also check if it's wiggly sideways, and if that sits nice and tight, you're good to go. If it is wiggly, the magazine that it comes with, try another one. It's kind of a hit or miss with the magazine, especially with the different countries that produce the magazine, the different materials, the different iterations on the AKs you have. But it should fit most magazines, and they shouldn't have that much play. So I can do a comparison with an old Bakelite magazine, and this one feeds perfectly fine, but this one is a bit more wiggly, as you can tell, but this sideways, it's nice. So if it wiggles sideways in all magazines you try, it's probably a bag magwell, so that's something to look out for too. And the final thing is to actually fire the rifle. So now we know the build quality, we know its condition, we know if it's safe to fire, right? Thanks to our no-go gauge and the rivets and the whole check we did. Take it to the range, fire 1 or 2 magazines, see if it feeds properly. Check if the accuracy is what you expect of the rifle. You should be able to hit targets out to 300 meters without any problems. Well, depending on the caliber too, but make sure it's what you expect of the rifle. It feeds properly. It should fire steel-cased ammo. If it doesn't fire steel-cased ammo, then it's a weird AK. I mean, I would never use an AK that only eats brass, but that's your thing. It should eat steel without any problems. So if it runs smooth, it passes all those tests, you'll have an AK that will last you a long time, and you can enjoy for thousands and thousands of rounds. So have fun.